The dim glow of a crisp autumn afternoon filtered through the grand, marble-lined halls of First Trust Bank, casting a serene yet ominous light over the quiet streets of Willow Creek, a sleepy coastal town in Oregon, where the ordinary reigned supreme until that moment. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and in shuffled an elderly man, his weathered face partially shrouded by the brim of a tattered fedora. At 78, Samuel Sam Grayson moved with a stoop, his frail frame burdened by a coarse, stained, burlap sack slung over his shoulder. The handful of patrons in the lobby barely spared him a glance, while the tellers behind the gleaming counters exchanged subtle, amused smirks. To them, he was just another drifter, likely there to beg for spare change rather than conduct business. But when he reached the center of the room and raised his head, his sharp, piercing eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and something deeper silenced their assumptions. "I am the rightful owner of this bank," he declared, his voice steady and resonant despite his worn appearance. A hush fell over the room, broken only by a faint chuckle that rippled through the air, followed by another. The security guard, a towering figure named Marcus Reed, 32 and broad-shouldered, crossed his arms with a skeptical grin and stepped forward. "Sir," Marcus said, his tone firm but tinged with mockery, "I think you got the wrong place. Why don't you take a seat and we'll get someone to assist you?" A young teller, 23-year-old Lily Carter, leaned toward her coworker, stifling a giggle as she murmured something under her breath. The branch manager, Daniel Hawthorne, 45, clad in a crisp navy suit, sighed and approached with the practiced calm of someone used to diffusing odd situations. "Sir," Daniel said, offering a gentle, patronizing smile, "with all due respect, that's highly unlikely. Do you have an account with us?" Sam tilted his head, his lined face unreadable. "An account? Boy, I founded this bank." A nervous titter escaped the small crowd. Marcus edged closer, his hand resting near his belt. "Okay, sir, let's see what's in that sack," he said, his voice carrying a hint of impatience. Sam's lips curled into a slow, deliberate smile, not warm but heavy with memory and a trace of menace. He shifted the sack and let it fall to the polished floor with a resounding thud that halted the laughter mid-breath. "I'm not mistaken," he said, his words clear and unwavering. "This bank is mine." The chuckles had spread like wildfire moments before, but they wouldn't last. Sam bent down, his gnarled fingers grasping the burlap, and as he pulled, it opened. The atmosphere shifted. Laughter died, replaced by a stunned silence, as faded stacks of banknotes tumbled onto the marble, crisp bundles, bound with paper bands stamped with First Trust Bank's original crest, a design retired over 60 years ago. Next came a weathered ledger, its leather binding cracked and peeling, its pages yellowed yet intact. Then a sheaf of aged, stamped legal papers followed. Daniel's eyes widened, his composure faltering. What is all this?" he stammered, stepping closer. "Proof," Sam replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "Proof that I built this bank, that it was mine long before your parents were born." Marcus furrowed his brow, but held his ground. Even he, no expert in finance, could see the bills were authentic. Daniel swallowed hard, his thoughts racing. "That's impossible," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Even if you've got old money, it doesn't mean—" "Check the ledger," Sam cut in. "My name's there." Daniel hesitated, then knelt and lifted the book with cautious hands. He flipped through the fragile pages until he stopped cold, his gaze snapping to Sam in disbelief. "Samuel Grayson," he whispered. Sam nodded. "That's me." A woman by the counter gasped, and a man near the exit muttered under his breath. The name rang a bell: Samuel Grayson, the bank's first founder, a figure presumed dead for decades. "There's no way that's you," Daniel said, shaking his head. Samuel Grayson would be ancient by now. Sam's eyes gleamed. I'm 78, and I'm standing right here. The room grew heavy with silence, the earlier amusement replaced by a suffocating tension as Daniel pored over the ledger again, his hands shaking. Each faded line of ink hit him like a blow, unraveling a legacy of deceit and betrayal. This ledger's over 60 years old, Daniel began, his voice barely audible. Older than that, Sam corrected, straightening slightly. I started this bank in 1952 with my own sweat and blood, and I ran it until they ripped it away from me. Daniel's head jerked up. Ripped it away? Sam's grip tightened on the sack's edge. They stole it, turned on me, wiped me out of existence. His gaze swept the room, the ornate chandelier, the polished counters, the gleaming marble floor. They built all this on my ruin. Marcus cleared his throat. Okay, this is getting wild, he muttered, glancing at Daniel. Boss, should we call the police? Daniel didn't respond, his attention fixed on the ledger's dates and signatures, which matched the framed certificates on the wall behind. Him. Samuel Grayson wasn't a legend, he was real. No need for that, Daniel said slowly, turning to Sam. Mr. Grayson, if you're really him, what happened? Why did you vanish? Sam exhaled sharply, his lips pressing into a thin line, as if restraining a flood of anger. I was betrayed, he said, his voice low and bitter. By my partner, Edward Pierce. We built this bank together. He was like a brother until greed twisted him. One day, he doctored the papers, convinced the board I was unfit, and just like that, I was gone. My name was erased, my life destroyed. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. But that was ages ago, a woman in the back whispered. Sam nodded. I fought to reclaim it for years, but every door slammed shut, every eye turned away. Then one day, I disappeared, because that's what they wanted, isn't it? For me to fade into nothing. Daniel's throat tightened. And now you're back. Sam nodded firmly. Yes, I'm back. His fingers clenched the sack again. And I'm here to take what's mine. A chill swept through the room. Marcus shifted, uneasy. All right, sir, I'm going to need you to... Sam reached into the sack once more. Gasps erupted. A woman near the door flinched and Marcus's hand darted to his holster. But Sam withdrew not a weapon, but the stack of legal papers. Daniel took them hesitantly, his eyes scanning the text, his expression growing graver with each word. Then he froze, hands trembling. Good Lord, he whispered. What is it? Marcus asked, still on edge. Daniel met Sam's gaze. These documents, they prove you never sold the bank. Sam gave a curt, satisfied nod. Exactly. Daniel shook his head incredulous. If these are legitimate, and they just look at the certificates. Behind me, bearing the name Harrington and Co. The family that's run this bank for generations. Then this place was stolen from you. The crowd buzzed louder, the papers hinting at a scheme far beyond a personal grudge between Sam and Edward Pierce. Before the tension could ease, a sleek silver sedan rolled up outside. A man in a tailored black suit stepped out, his steely grey eyes scanning the scene with surgical precision. I'm Agent Nathan Cole, he announced, his voice sharp and authoritative. I'm with the Federal Financial Crimes Division. We've got evidence that your little dispute ties into a nationwide web of financial fraud, possibly money laundering on a massive scale. In the boardroom, where Daniel and a few senior staff had retreated, a stunned silence descended. The ledger lay open on the table like a dark omen. Thomas Reed, a 50-year-old board member, muttered, This wasn't misplaced. It was buried on purpose. But by whom? The realization that First Trust Bank's origins were cloaked in layers of lies sent a wave of dread through the room. Daniel's mind raced, dredging up vague memories of hushed talks and old gossip. Had Edward Pierce acted alone in stripping Sam of his claim, or was there a hidden puppet master pulling strings behind the bank's facade? Before he could voice his suspicions, the boardroom door flew open. Agent Cole stood framed in the doorway, his presence underscoring that this was no small-town matter, but a piece of a sprawling federal probe. We've uncovered similar records in cities across the country over the past 15 years, Cole said. If that ledgers are authentic, it exposes a calculated falsification of financial records to conceal dirty money. This goes way beyond Willow Creek. Outside, amid rising chaos, a young teller, 21-year-old Emma Hayes, whose earlier, playful handling of an old banknote had drawn a few laughs, was hustled away by jittery staff. Marcus spotted a wiry figure in the growing crowd, a man in a threadbare coat, his eyes burning with nervous energy. The stranger's stare locked with Sam's, who lingered near the entrance, his craggy face a mask of enigma. "Mr. Grayson," Cole called, "you're coming with me for questioning. That ledger's now evidence." Sam's eyes flickered between resistance and acceptance. "I didn't come here to stir trouble," he said, his voice quavering yet resolute. "I came to take back what's mine. Now you're saying I'm caught in a mess bigger than my own betrayal." With that, he let himself be escorted away, leaving the bank humming with anxious whispers. As twilight deepened, the sedan's engine purred into the night, whisking Sam to a stark interrogation room where Agent Cole began his probe. "Your ledger," Cole said, his tone measured, "surfaced just as we're closing in on a financial crime network spanning multiple states. Why did you hold on to these papers all these years?" Sam leaned forward, his voice a hoarse whisper, thick with grief and resolve. "I waited for the truth to break free. These were all I had to prove my legacy was stolen. I learned that silence feeds treachery." Cole's expression darkened. "Let me be clear. If you're hiding anything else, you'll be silenced for good." Beyond the interrogation room, a tempest brewed not just from the federal investigation, but within Willow Creek itself. News of the probe tore through the town like a wildfire. The board members, still reeling, huddled in a shadowy corner to strategize. "We can't let this spin out of control," Thomas insisted. "If Cole's right, our bank's tangled in crimes far beyond one man's grudge. Our whole history's a fraud." Daniel, his eyes hollow, gripped the ledger and murmured, "I trusted our legacy. Now I see we've been shielding sins buried deep." Then came Abigail Morrow, 72, the bank's long-retired archivist, her arrival commanding instant respect. Dressed in a faded grey coat, her gaze swept the room with the weight of decades. "I've seen secrets stashed in these walls. For years," she said softly, unrolling a fragile sheet from a worn leather pouch. "These records predate your ledger. They show the bank was born from a covert syndicate, not honest locals, but power brokers laundering cash for political heavyweights." Her revelation hit like a thunderclap, shattering the cozy myth of First Trust Bank and replacing it with a saga of corruption, betrayal, and cold ambition. Even as Cole's car sped off with Sam, the disclosures piled up. Within hours, the town's initial shock gave way to heated debate at an impromptu town hall. Daniel faced a restless crowd. "Today, we confront not just one man's wrong, but a rot that's poisoned our community," he said gravely. "Do we hold on to our old lies or embrace a future forged in hard truth?" His words struck a chord, though some shrank from the fallout of exposing buried secrets. The meeting was disrupted when masked figures stormed in, their faces veiled by dark hoods, their voices raw with rage. "We know what you're hiding, and we want answers." In the chaos, Emma stepped forward, her voice shaky but firm. "Stop. We can't let fear take over. If we give in to violence, we lose everything we're fighting for. Her words pierced the tension, and the intruders slowly lowered their fists, their fury simmering into resolve. Talk swirled that a shadowy figure, once Edward Pierce's confidant, was involved. Then a woman shed her disguise, Margaret Maggie Klein, 41, a former aide to the influential Harrington family. Her eyes brimmed with remorse and determination as she recounted the bank's dark past. Years back, I helped erase Samuel Grayson's name, she confessed, her voice thick with guilt. I thought loyalty to power was my only way out. But watching the innocent pay the price, I saw our lies were a crushing burden. I'm here to set it right, not to destroy, but to heal us. Maggie's admission rocked the room. Her vivid tales of clandestine meetings, falsified records, and doctored ledgers sketched a betrayal so vast that Sam's plight seemed just one thread in a sprawling tapestry of corruption. Daniel, though shaken by the depth of the deceit, felt a flicker of hope. "So what now?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "How do we bring justice to those who've exploited us for generations?" The crowd murmured a blend of doubt and yearning. Plans took shape. A public inquiry, a team of independent investigators, and a pledge from Cole to dig relentlessly, even at personal risk. As night fell, Sam was released on bail, returning to Willow Creek under tight security, met with awe and wariness. At a somber vigil in the bank's courtyard, he spoke quietly but with steel. "I've endured the worst a man can face, but I've also seen truth's power to mend. Our past is scarred, but we owe it to ourselves to reclaim our legacy with honesty and guts." In the weeks that followed, investigators sifted through dusty archives and secret stashes. A distant cousin of the original founders, Victor Lang, 55, surfaced with a claim to the bank's profits, his account adding depth to the unfolding drama and suggesting a decades-long effort to rewrite the truth. Daniel, Maggie, and a tight-knit team ventured to an abandoned cannery on Willow Creek's edge. Amid crumbling crates and brittle ledgers, they found damning proof photos, sealed letters, and cryptic notes tying top officials and tycoons to the bank's shady dealings. A faded portrait bore the initials JT and a haunting inscription, "To stand as the keeper of our true inheritance." It cemented Maggie's story and pointed to a meticulously crafted conspiracy by ruthless elites. Armed with this evidence, Daniel and his crew braced for a final reckoning with the forces behind the bank's shadowed history. At a public gathering in the refurbished bank, now a symbol of shame and strength, Daniel stood before a tense crowd, papers and photos laid out for all to see. "Today," he proclaimed, "we lay bare a betrayal stretching back decades. We won't let corruption shape our tomorrow. Every truth will shine, no matter how it stings." As the proof unfolded, Willow Creek's people felt a surge of unity, a vow to rebuild on openness. Soon after, Cole arrived with federal agents. They traced the money trails across state lines, and that morning, arrests swept up officials, moguls, and local power players linked to the plot to bury Sam's legacy. The shockwaves rippled beyond Willow Creek, shattering First Trust banks, old lore and sparking a call for a fresh start rooted in integrity. Sam, now an unlikely hero, walked free from custody, stepping back into town under a sky heavy with promise and doubt. At another quiet vigil in the courtyard, he mused, "Truth rises from even the blackest betrayals. We must stay sharp. Every victory over shadow brings new tests." His words echoed with the gathered townsfolk, now bound by a shared duty to fend off future lies. Over the months ahead, as probes deepened and the syndicate's grip dissolved, Willow Creek evolved. The Grayson Heritage Bank emerged anew, not just a financial hub, but a beacon of community memory and learning. Stark walls gave way to murals of the town's real story, and plaques honored the fighters for justice. Maggie taught the young about power's perils, while Daniel labored with feds and locals to lock the past's lessons in place. Yet, as healing took root, a twist emerged. One still winter night, after the last snow hushed the world, a plain envelope arrived at the banks. New archive, no sender, just a cryptic emblem matching the founder's old seal. Inside, a handwritten note read, "The end is merely a start. Trust not just what you've found, but the watchfulness that must endure." It chilled the archivists and investigators, a stark warning that today's triumph didn't end the fight. That unease lingered as the town basked in its hard-won clarity, a reminder that truth's war never truly ceased. In quiet cafe chats and brisk park huddles, residents swore to stay vigilant. They'd reclaimed their story, but knew each win was a breath before the next trial. So, as a spring's first light streamed through the bank's stained glass panes, Willow Creek rose from its murky past with guarded hope. Sam Grayson's saga, the fall of a trusted pillar, and the relentless hunt for truth had reshaped the town's core. Every secret shared, every brave stand, every redemptive act proved that while corruption's battle might stretch on, truth's flame would guide them still. And as a new day broke over Willow Creek, its people forged by struggle, lifted by faith, moved forward with a steadfast vow to honor the hard-earned lessons of blood and ink, shielding truth's fragile glow against the ever-present specter of greed.